Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Mindset Kitchen podcast. And with your host, Chef Hashim. And today, sorry, my man Kareem is not there. This is going to be, we've been doing a lot of fuss since some time. So this is the first episode where we're having a guest. So I don't know if I told this to Roberto. We've done around 45 episodes. It's just me and my co-host. So we just thought, you know what, let's start bringing in guests. So you are like special for the episode. So I just want to quickly introduce Roberto. Welcome, Roberto, to the show.
Thank you, Chef. It's an honor, and even more knowing I'm the first guest. So it feels a special edition you're doing. So I'm honored about it.
Yeah. So I will give you a very short introduction of who Roberto is. Roberto is currently the managing director for Microsoft Startups for the Middle East region, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And before that, he was the product head for marketing platforms in Google.
I was the regional head, looking after marketing platforms at Google for a long time. I've been with Google for about 10 years.
Yeah, so he's an ex-Google,
yes,
ex-Googler as well. So the story is very interesting. Honestly saying, me and Roberto, we don't know each other much. I've seen him in the last 1 year, any event to do with entrepreneurship or startups. By default, I look at the poster, I'm like, oh, where's Roberto? He should be there. Okay, he's there. So I met in one of the events where, in this podcast, Mindset Kitchen, we are all about the stories, the candid discussions, personal experiences. So in that particular one event where I saw Roberto, where I saw you, I heard one of the stories and your origin story, like we like to call it. So today's discussion mainly is about two things. One is what if there is something called a mindset that entrepreneurs have. Yeah, in your years of experience, I'm sure you have some story before Google. Yeah, and I think this is what we will discuss today. Like, who is Roberto, where he started from, how he ended up with Google, how he ended up with Microsoft. So this is the main thing that I want to actually focus on. So over to you, Roberto. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Amazing. Thank you, Sheyaf. And by the way, I'm not in the metaverse yet. So you have seen me in physical events for now. Thank you so much, first of all, for having me. As you said, it's true. The last year has been intense because I've been definitely very much involved in many ecosystem activities, but also with an intention, right? So very few people know that, first of all, we exist as a team here at Microsoft working with startups. We are a sort of an underdog when it comes to startups within the tech companies, right? So Google is related to startup anyhow, somehow. Mm-hmm. And AWS, Amazon started investing in working with startups earlier on, right? So Microsoft is more related to big corporates, large enterprises, even if a lot of things have been changing, right? So we started a couple of years ago, COVID hit. So definitely we had to be involved in the ecosystem and tell the story why we are here, what is Microsoft doing, why Microsoft, right, is doing something with startups. So that's why you have seen me probably around a number of events, not all of them. I still have some limits, but the purpose is definitely to be engaged with the ecosystem, right, and try to understand what really can move the needle, where we can support. So, to your question about myself, let me know where you want to start, because first of all, I appreciate your question, because when we talk to startups, for example, we try to spend most of the time about their idea, their solution. And a little time to understand who is the person in front of us, the founder, the entrepreneur, right? So what's his purpose or her purpose? Who she or he is really as a person, right? So why he's doing or she's doing whatever she's doing. So, and that's probably the most interesting part of the story, is always about the person, right? The motivation, the ambition, the story behind the scenes. So I appreciate your question, and guide me where you want me to start exactly.
Yeah. I mean, you can start at, I remember I actually went through a lot of your content in the past 2-3 days, because I believe if you're interviewing somebody, I mean, you should know a little bit about. So I remember seeing one of your presentations where you're talking about your parents and the kind of which part of Italy? You're from Italy, right?
I am originally from Italy. I'm from the north of Italy, from probably the most industrial city in Italy, Milano, in the very up north, and I was born there. My family, my parents are from there, and that's a very productive sort of part of Italy. Usually, the stereotype is Italy is the bella vita, is the dolce vita, is take things easy, relaxed. The north of Italy is not probably following that stereotype. That's more the south of Italy. But the north is because of the history, right? The domination from France, from Germany and the Austrians. So before, so it's much very more Middle European sort of city. So very productive people, are hard workers. And then when the war hit, I mean, it was and after the economic boom in the 60s.
You mean the World War II?
The World War II, yeah. In fact, what defines me, and usually, you mentioned my parents, usually it's exactly what defines me is who I am is in my roots, right? So I grew up in a family where my father was an entrepreneur. So my father was about 11 years old when World War II hit Europe. And he used to tell me stories about those times. And, when you grow up and you understand what he's talking about, you're curious about, hey, what was like, what will look like in that period of time, right? So how people were living and how was they recovering from such a destruction and the situation of the war. And he was telling me stories about how they were 5 siblings, so how they were even hiding bread in their own house because it was not enough for everyone, right? So things like that, you understand that, today we are also complaining about things that are a fraction of what probably people in that time were experiencing or they went through, right? So, and that's where the inspiration started. Is my father was not able to complete his studies. And today we talk a lot about the future of work, the future of education. People that want to have this piece of paper, the certifications, the degrees, these recognitions all the time. But think about it. Just a few years ago, my father and many other people like him, right? So he didn't have the privilege to finish his studies and he had to find his own way on the street, basically. So he started helping in this small boutique that they were manufacturing t-shirts, shirts, and he learned a little bit about that industry, right? So, and the nitty-gritty and the tips and tricks of how to do those things. And then he came up with this idea of, I know a bit about that. So, and a lot of companies in the economic boom, they needed publicity, promotion, merchandising. So he connected the dots across a couple of things that he was good at in his life, that he learned himself. One was, I know a little bit about fashion, textile, and I know a little bit about how to make shirts and the whole things behind that. I know how to sell to people because you learned on the street, right? It's something that you have to learn if you do not have any choice. And he came up with this idea of setting up his own company to purchase, these t-shirts, and then he expanded with other gadgets, items, put a logo on it, and there were a lot of companies at the time that wanted to advertise in these big conferences, promotion, right? So, and he built his own business. And I remember when I was a kid, I grew up in because he had this warehouse with all these sort of gadgets, right? From pens, hats, t-shirts, calendars, agendas, whatever, right? So, and once you're a kid and you can be curious around and put your hands where you shouldn't. Yeah. And I was surrounded by all of these gadgets, and I loved gadgets. Right? It was like toys for me. So I grew up immersed into that sort of experience. And seeing my father always out there, right? So doing something, not behind the desk, right? Any single time. He was always outside looking for clients, thinking with his mind, how to make things happen, how to find a new customer, how to find a new way to get, into open doors and things like that, right? So, and I was inspired because everywhere I went with him, I see that people were happy to receive him, and people were inviting him for food, whether it was a breakfast, a coffee, or a lunch, and say, wow, that looks cool, like, it looks exciting. And he was having conversation, talking to people, and people were happy in general talking to him, right? So I said, wow, this looks pretty cool. And then when I was in the car with him, I kind of absorbed his thought process, right? He was thinking, sometimes he was talking to himself, like how he could have done something, or what is the next thing that he could have thought of doing, because it was on his own, right? So it was just he himself trying to build something, right? So, and that was super cool. So I grew up in that sort of environment, and that inspired me to, first of all, not thinking that someone will give it to you, right? So you need to go for it, not waiting for things to happen. You own your destiny, right? So you own you build your own luck, in a way, because I've seen many situations where things didn't go very well. And definitely there were ups and downs in the history. I mean, I've seen and they faced periods where things were going great, but periods where things were not going that great, right? So, and even there, when you're a teenager or even a kid, you kind of sense it, you feel it, right? You feel it. But you see, the attitude was always, you help yourself, right? So you don't wait someone to give it to you. You need to build it. So that was the environment I've been growing up with, and probably luckily enough for my father, it was also my mother that was covering all other possible roles you would think in a company that my father was not covering, right? So he was out there building it, finding customers, thinking about the strategy, the business model, the direction, what to do. But my mother was doing all the rest.
Wow.
She was the CFO, the CMO, the Chief Operation Officer. I mean, let me say, she was running the whole warehouse, receiving the goods, and working with some other few employees to run it. But she was handling the accounting. She was handling the marketing. She was handling everything else, right? So she was bringing order to a space where without that, my father couldn't have done what he did, right? So, and so these were my parents, right? So sometimes there were sort of struggles because it's like the opposite sides, right? So you have someone who is creative, who is out there, cannot be behind the desk, and someone who is very precise, methodic, structured. Put them together. It's
left and right brain.
Oh yeah, left and right. Yeah, or really black and white, right? But you see, there you also learn that you need to complement yourself. You need to be honest with yourself. You cannot be great at everything, and you need to play by your strengths. But where you don't have strengths, you need to seek for help. You need to seek for alliances. You need to have someone there to complement and be there to help to build something, right? So that's also another learning. And not all of the people get these learnings, because sometimes, depending, the situation where you grow up, maybe your parents are employees in a corporation, and you don't feel that.
I mean, just to, it's very interesting that the question that I had, right, Roberto, this is exactly, I think I've achieved what I wanted, because most of the time, instead of asking from the beginning itself, what advice do you have, we all see where you are right now. So my question was how you reached there. I think your origin story, if you compare this with a lot of entrepreneurs today, I think there is always, in your case, we call it like double whammy. Like, it's not just your dad who heavily influenced you. I think, like you said, your mom was also like quite involved, and definitely when a child sees this, I'm sure it had a very big influence on you. And okay, now moving on from that phase, then I don't want to ask you how old you are.
Oh,
how young you are.
Don't do that.
I mean. So let's fast forward. How did you dabble or step into? Because in Google, were you working with startups?
In Google, I primarily I joined Google when Google acquired a company called DoubleClick late 2008. DoubleClick, yeah.
That's my other business, by the way.
Oh, amazing! So
marketing agency. Marketing agency.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, we can talk hours about it. But no, look, Google acquired DoubleClick in late 2008. I joined early 2009. So I joined into what was called the DoubleClick division, right? So it was like being in a startup sort of within Google, because Google was already kind of an established brand but growing very fast on the media side of things. And DoubleClick was something new, right? So something that was just acquired. a lot of people were skeptical or just curious about it. Say, hey, what is that thing, right? We're selling media. This sounds technology. This sounds
in between,
something different, right? So, and we were a tiny team. So I was in charge to help developing the business across Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Africa. It was a huge region, but I mean the priorities were clear, right? So I spent most of the time at the beginning in France as the hub for Southern Europe, Spain, Italy, Eastern Europe, Poland, Czech Republic, and then in emerging markets, right? So Russia, Israel, Turkey, and then Middle East and Africa. But the job was to develop this business, right? So I remember the first meeting I had with an agency, their CEO was kind of yelling at us because we were showing up after a period of time that in those countries nobody has ever been there, right? So the beginning was like, this doesn't sound the core business of Google, right? Where everybody open the door, you're welcomed, and say, yes, we do business with you, right? This is different. This is something new. We have to establish the brand. We have to tell the story. We have to build the vision. We have to establish the relationship. We have to tell the why. We have to educate agencies and partners and advertisers and publishers on how to use the platform. The product was not on par with many competitors at the time. There were companies like Kenshu, Marine Software on search, and on display there were many others. So we were not there yet, right? So it took 2 years for Google to rebuild, double-click on what it's called the Google stack, right? So to rebuild the product in a way it could be integrated with the Google machine, the Google stack. So at the beginning was hard. It was not like being in the core business where everything was, the doors were open. It's a no-brainer. There is no competition. We have to do that, right? It's like, guys, who are you and why shall we be working with you? What is it you're doing? Do we need that? It's different, right? So when I joined Google, I was not primarily working with startups, but I was working in a startup within Google, which was pretty cool.
Okay, now I get it. Okay, so it was like a startup. It's a baby, Google's baby. It was, okay.
Absolutely. It was like, because I still remember in the early days in the office, there were Googlers that came to say, what are you doing here? Why are you sitting on this desk? And they say, well, I'm an employee, but you work for DoubleClick, right? So you should be a guest. No, DoubleClick has been acquired by Google. I am a colleague of yours. I have all the rights to sit here. But you see, it was not the job to be done was not just externally to develop the business, was also internally to educate internal teams. Hey, this is why we exist. This is why Google acquired DoubleClick, and this is what's in it for you. This is how we can help you, and how we can work together. So all of that requires time to build across many geographies, and so that was exciting. It was like a startup within Google, which was kind of already not a startup anymore. When I joined Google, we were probably 10,000, 11,000 employees, not more than that. Okay. In 2009, early 2009.
I mean, so I understand. So after Google, I felt, then you moved to Microsoft.
Recently, a couple of years ago, I moved to Microsoft. I spent a good almost 10 years at Google in different geographies, in different capacity, but always in the
startup
division of of platforms. At the beginning, primarily working with large advertisers, publishers, media agencies, independent agencies. And in the last year and a half at Google here in Dubai, I also took a leadership role in Google for Startups to work through the regional partnerships for Google for Startups on top of the core role.
Now, I think now we just understand a little bit of your background and what you've actually worked, but it's very interesting. Now, the question actually that I wanted to ask you, frame, is, now I told you right before we started the kind of audience that I have. Our audience is not the kind of audience who are heavily into startups. But a lot of people I know in the past 2 or 3 years, they've actually taken the plunge. Let's say in India, a lot of them are there. Like people sitting in Dubai know how big of a market India is.
Yeah.
Okay, but the people in India, most of the time, they don't realize this. They think, and the kind of entrepreneurship risks or trials they are doing is, it's very small scale. So this is a scale that I want to discuss. The scale I'm talking about is, it does not have terminologies like seed funding, unicorns, because this is why I asked you a story for. So let's say there is somebody who's my listener, is a university student, or somebody who's a millennial, already in the 30s.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And usually the way we look at entrepreneurs, okay, when you look at them, there is a particular kind of impression people have about entrepreneurs. This is a question I want to ask. Is there something like an entrepreneurial mindset which is different from a normal mindset?
Look, I believe that there is mindset.
Okay.
Right. So, and mindset is what can make a big difference.
Yes.
Because it's like I've had the chance to interview some players, professional players in different sports, whether it's basketball or football, and they all tell you one thing, that you need to train your body as much as you train your brain, your mind, right? Even if you, for example, you spend time picturing yourself in your mind, shooting, scoring, right? So you take basketball, for example, or football. That helps you build the mindset. So picturing yourself as a winning player, always holding your head right? Even if you miss a penalty or miss something or you don't score, right? So it helps you build that positive mindset. So it starts with mindset, in my opinion. Can we call it an entrepreneurial mindset? I don't know, but I believe that mindset it can make a big difference, right? Yeah.
No, I mean, I just want to frame it. First of all, mindset is all what we talk about in our podcast, Mindset Kitchen.
Amazing, yeah.
But I also understand that, yes, there is no mindset out there which was named the entrepreneurial mindset. But my question, even more direct to you, is if, according to you, in your experience of a lot of entrepreneurs that you've met, and you being an entrepreneur yourself, what are some core elements?
Yeah.
Like, I will get started with one of the things that I heard is, we discuss a lot about the growth and fixed mindset in the show. We've done it. We've had so many episodes about it. So if growth mindset is one among them. What is 2-3 other qualities that you feel if a person has? Okay, this is what we can call an entrepreneurial mindset.
No, absolutely. Look, there are definitely a few things. Definitely one thing that I have experienced is when an entrepreneur tends to fall in love with a problem, not with the solution. So what excites her or him is the problem itself. While all other people would already be thinking, hey, I have the solution. And they go and say, and this is my solution, and go and pitch the solution. Entrepreneurs spend more time on the problem space before jumping to the solution space. They try to go to the root of what's the real problem. And because if they go to the root of the real problem, they already know that everything else is a consequence of. Right? So the scale, if I go to the root of a problem and I really try to fix that thing and I'm able to see it, I'm sure that many people are facing it. That's the real thing that people are facing. Right? So an entrepreneur really falls in loves solving the problem. So I had the chance, for example, to interview and to meet with Uri Levin, who was one of the two co-founders of Waze, and that was Google Waze.
The map, yeah.
And actually, Waze was sold at Google. I was still at Google when Waze was sold at Google. And Uri, for example, he left Waze the same evening or night that Waze was sold to Google, was officially sold to Google, right? So because he already had something else in mind. So he was already on another problem that he wanted to solve, and then he built a second unicorn, moved it, and then he has a portfolio now of 13, 14 startups, three or four are on the journey to unicorns as well, right? So, but you see, this is a serial mindset of, I see this is a real problem. I see this as a problem because with Waze, for example, he was stressed of, the problem for him was, he was living in Tel Aviv and he said, I want to go from point A from point A to point B, but I'm stressed because he was cycling in Tel Aviv and there is traffic. So he said, there is too much traffic here. Is there an alternative route, right? So how can I go from point A to point B in the shortest period of time and avoiding traffic as much as possible? And he put it on a piece of paper. He started trying to solve it and engineering the problem and try to get to the root of it, right? So and then he came out. So it took some time for him to build Waze, but this is what he was passionate about. And once he saw that he solved it, he was not stressed to say, oh, I am the CEO of Waze, right? When they sold it to Google, then his mind was already on another problem. Then he say, oh, there is another opportunity, right? So this is one thing. The other thing.
So just to recap that. So this is something very interesting. I've always heard a lot of different things. When you said falling in love, I thought this with the problem, not the solution.
Yeah.
So this is one trait.
Yeah.
Somebody who actually romanticizes the problem rather than the solution.
and go deep into the problem, right? So try to go really at the root of what because sometimes you see a lot of pitches with founders that are really just scratching the surface and are trying to curate the symptoms of something, and they don't go to the root of the problem. And that's what prevents them to have scalable solutions that can. So this is one thing. Another trait I would say, if you ask me about what makes an entrepreneurial mindset, I believe that there are more things. One is the diversity of experiences that you go through as an individual, right? So think about the story of Steve Jobs. He tells you how he started learning about design and this and that, and he tells you how at some point in his life he realized, hey, wait a second, I know a bit of this, I did that, and I'm passionate about that. What if I start connecting the dots across these things that I have in my life that make me unique, right? So, and he came out with a synthesis of things he was good at or passionate about, but he found a viable market as well. So something that people was also willing to pay for, right? So one thing is, one way you can, or the mindset an entrepreneur might have is this curiosity of exposing yourself to situations, experiences where you can learn from, where maybe you don't necessarily know why you're doing in that very moment. But at some point in your life, you have the ability to step back and say, wait a second, I know about this, I'm very good at that, and I have this passion. What if this comes together to solve this problem, right? So it's the diversity of not forcing yourself in the same circle of people around the same topic all the time. It's exposing yourself in uncomfortable conversation, in learning new things at the crux of different disciplines sometimes. This is where innovation sometimes happens, right? It's not all of the times, I'm saying. Sometimes innovation is purely incremental, and you don't have to come up with the breakthrough, right? So it doesn't happen like that. But the way you can increase chances or the likelihood to find new things is also exposing yourself to situations where you feel uncomfortable. So what I feel is entrepreneurs feel comfortable being uncomfortable, right? So they get out of their comfort zone without feeling the pressure sometimes, without questioning too much. They just do it. And by doing that, and by being aware that they have these different things, and they put it together, they come with this approach, this idea. And finally, I would say is also how you measure your success, right? So I see that sometimes entrepreneurs, they start from the end instead of starting from the start. They start from the end and say, what's the legacy that they want to leave? How do you picture, let's say I start this, how do you picture myself at the end of this? And this forces yourself to ask who you are as a person, as an individual, right? So why you're doing what you're doing. At the end of the day, we know that building a startup is hard work, and most of them fail, right? So why an individual would do that if everybody tells you, yeah, but 95% of startups fail? Say, okay, you know what? Maybe it's not for me, right? So these people, real entrepreneurs, they don't listen to that, right? So they know that there is a little.
That's fine. We have some phone going off.
Oh, that's you can turn it off. Yeah.
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, but recapping, I was telling you. So entrepreneurs, they try to.
How they measure their success?
They measure their success, right? But it's sometimes the way is starting from the end. So is the legacy that you leave behind, is building something, the outcomes of which someone else will take forward, right? So they're not stressed about the title. Or the appearance. They're focused on the help.
On this, okay, let's tone it down. This last point, the first 2 points is very clear, and I think this is something. If they start practicing those things like curiosity, or what I understood is first is having a mindset of solving problems.
Yeah.
Okay, and going in deep. The second point that you mentioned is. Exposing yourself, curiosity, exposing yourself to multiple areas, not limiting yourself. But third, starting from the end. But somebody, let's say, again, we are talking very high level with big startups. I know a lot of people right now. I'm not somebody who's built a lot of startups, but I work with a lot of teenagers, for example, a lot of high school students. And even our own, this is a question they ask. Okay, I'm going to start something new. They don't think like this. I mean, they don't know. The idea is I'm 9 to 5 right now. And I want to get, and there are a lot of people I know who are 9 to 5, but I know they will make very, very good entrepreneurs, either because they have this very burning passion for something, but everybody is ready to take the risk. How can I tell this person about this? Start from the end.
Because the kicking point for me, the starting point is not I want to start something. It could be, but the kicking point is I see this pain. Oh, every day I wake up and I cannot stop thinking about why that thing is done that way, and it's so inefficient. There is so much pain in that. Is it possible that nobody sees it? Those are the questions, right? So you don't wake up in the morning and say, oh, I want to disrupt the healthcare industry, right? It's too broad. It's not actionable. You start from maybe you yourself, you're experiencing something that you are completely frustrated about, or your partner, or your family, or your friends. You start from your circle around you, right? And you start noticing something that you feel a disconnect with, that you feel frustrated about. This is usually where you see, hey, why that thing is working that way? Why nobody is complaining about it? Why everybody is complaining about it, but nobody is doing anything about it, right? So usually it starts from realizing at some point a moment of truth, a moment of disconnect.
That there is a problem.
There is a problem. Then maybe that's not the real problem.
Yeah.
So an entrepreneur maybe is also willing to go to the root of that problem, but then in the mindset is there is a line of sight. So I see that problem, and I see that it should be different. It's kind of reimagining how it should be, and that's the end. And then it's reverse engineering, right? Because sometimes there is a sort of a reality distortion that is a sort of a slippery slope in the mindset of entrepreneurs, which is, okay, let's say I see that problem and I have the solution, and I picture the reality with the solution already, and that's a slippery slope, because if it goes to exaggeration, it can end up to the wrong side of it. It can really fall down into something that then can fail or can derail, or on the other side is, there should be enough sort of authenticity, but also effectiveness into this process, right? So, I see that problem, and you decompose it into smaller pieces, you try to build something, and you test it. You test it with your first users, which could be your friends, your family, but also someone else, right? So your circle that is accessible to you, and you start seeing there is evidence, right? So you start feeling people are reacting to that, and you are getting feedback, and you say, look, yeah, it could be, and you persevere, and you have the resilience in that, right? So that's one thing. It's about, that's what I mean when I say
starting by that. I think it makes sense. Thinking of the last bit and then building on from there. So I think we are almost there towards the time. But just to, I think definitely we need to have Roberto again on the show, because of all the points that I had, I think we've not even discussed anything yet. We definitely have more episodes. But one thing what I understood today is, and this was very refreshing, honestly, Roberto, because usually everybody talks about the growth mindset, everybody talks about the fixed mindset, people talk about resilience, grit, all this is there. But I think you gave a very refreshing angle, because I remember Seth Godin always, Seth Godin he always speaks about this curiosity angle.
Yeah.
And this thing of falling in love with the problem, and this problem going in deep, because most of us, I think the biggest issue, we're not talking about just startups, like even me at one point was falling in love with the solution.
Yeah.
Because solution is the first and most easiest thing. Yeah. So I think, the first point was falling in love with the problem, second is exposing yourself to, so if some of our listeners who are in college right now, universities, this is the best time. If you're in high school, even better. I would say expose themselves as much as to different kinds of experiences, right?
Yeah, and one way of thinking through it is don't manage your career as a linear path. Think about your career as a portfolio, right? So,
can you explain this? Thanks, sorry, you need to explain this. What do you mean by this?
What I mean is, it's pretty clear that before people were dreaming about, a full-time job, that probably they would have stuck with 15, 20 years, of course, growing with their title, responsibility, and so on and so forth. But today, that thing doesn't exist anymore, right? So it's not a linear path like that. The thinking should be, I have some value to offer. I can gain this experience. I have this passion. So why not building a portfolio of things where maybe,
Amazing.
you balance it like you would do with trading, right? So maybe you balance bonds and stocks. And it depends also on your appetite for risk, right? So higher risks is higher rewards. It's the same thing. But let's say you say 70% of my income would be from this job that is pretty much secure, but I learn, but I still want to keep 20% from this other thing and 10% from this other thing, right? Look at it as a portfolio of things where you are giving your time, right? So, and employers are changing, and with all this new generation of people, we call it the Gen Z or the millennial,
Gen Z
and the millennial and whatever. This new generation is looking at brands, and they don't think at brands as the owner of those brands think about themselves. They look at brands as purposes.
Yeah.
They look at brands as conversations, open with users, with people, right? So they have a very different view on the world and a very, very different way of doing things, right? So, and probably in the future there will be even more metaverse and things will happen in the metaverse, in the physical world, so it will be even more different, right?
I think we might have this podcast
in the metaverse. In the metaverse, okay. So, but the thing is, don't look at, it's not looking for an employer and you marry this employer for the rest of your life. It's, I want to expose myself to different experiences. And one way to do that is my career is a portfolio. So if, let's say, I still need to be realistic, right? So I still need to find something that pays my bills, right? So, okay, fair enough. But what if I can also dedicate part of my time of building these other things where I'm passionate about? Mm-hmm. I start, building situations or forcing myself in situations where sometimes it's volunteering, sometimes it's shadowing, sometimes is you start mentoring into an accelerator or incubator, sometimes is shadowing a startup, sometimes is teaching, sometimes it's giving back, whatever. But it's, you think of it as a portfolio, and you set objectives for each one of these portfolio activities you're doing, right? So because you want to feel a delta. The other advice I have is, a lot of people are stressed about building to-do lists, right? So what is the job that I need to do? And what is my to-do list today? Or even if they are longer term and say, what is my to-do list for this month? Or they told me to step back and think longer term, so what is my to-do list for this year so I can always prioritize? Mm-hmm. Fair enough, that's good to do. But what about your to-be list? Right, so the to-be list forces you to think, who am I and who I want to be? Right, so, and then there might be a delta. And how can I feel that delta? Again, who I want to be, who am I? So it forces you to introspectively search within yourself and say, look, there is one life. We are living longer, but still there is only one life.
Yeah. YOLO, like they say.
A lot of people don't like what they're doing, right? So you see all the researches, reports, and say, I hate my job. Why? Who are you? Who you want to be? What do you want to do? Of course, you need to be realistic, right? Something needs to pay your bill, but you need to build experiences. You need to force yourself into situations where you get closer to who you want to be. Because there was this research from Harvard, so the source is really credible. They analyzed a huge amount of data on people, and they try to analyze the top 5 regrets of people when they're dying.
Yeah, I read this, yeah.
And number 1 is people that regret that they lived someone else's life.
Yeah.
And this is number 1 regret, right? So, and you want to avoid that, right? So, because when it's too late, it's too late. So you need. So this is the other advice: is when we talk about a career path, think about it as a portfolio. Think about building your to-be list, and force yourself also in having, conversations with people that would be uncomfortable for you, right? So people tend to group with similar people for similar interests, right? So you work in, I don't know, telecommunications, you surround yourself with people that have this 20 years experience in telcos and have that background and blah, 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 right? So there's an example. But then you are biased because you don't see the world through different lenses. So what I ask my team, for example, is always to have every week a situation, could be a breakfast, a lunch, a walking meeting, whatever, right? So with someone that is not in your network, an artist, someone that works in biotechnologies, whatever, right? And forces yourself to think differently or look at the same thing you were trying to do, but from a different perspective. So these are. I
mean, this is very good. The second point, especially about this portfolio, I think this advice is directly going to go to my 13-year-old nephew, because I did not know how to put this to him. And this makes a lot of sense. Already I see Gen Z, this is how they look at relationships and work. I just want to try it out. I think it's a good. And lastly, guys, you heard this first in Mindset Kitchen, the to-be list. I mean, to-do list we've heard, and I recently read What Got You Here Will Not Get You There. It had to-stop list, which was also very nice. But to-be list, you heard it first here in Mindset Kitchen. So anyways, I think, Roberto, I would like to, we will definitely catch up for another episode, but today I think we are on time. And I know you have some other engagement as well. So I would really love to thank you for making out this time. And if anybody has any question, I will tag Roberto's Instagram credentials, his details. If anybody has any questions for him, you can ask. And if there is anything that you heard in this podcast, even if I get one question, I'm going to call him back. Either ways, I will call him back. But even if I get one question, we are going to record one more episode or two more episodes, because there are a lot of other things we want to actually talk about. So, Roberto, thanks a lot for coming to the episode, and we will see you soon.
Only my pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation. So happy to meet you again, and definitely have a longer conversation for sure.
So guys, as usual, I hope you guys are enjoying these new episodes with me and Kareem in person as well. And this is our first guest on the Mindset Kitchen. If you have any more guests that you think we should invite, I have a full list of guests from Dubai, because I like to do in person rather than just Zoom. So let us know. Subscribe, messages, especially those things that you don't like more than what you like. What you like, also tell us. What you don't like, tell us. I will see you in the next episode. Until then, take care, guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, Chef.
Good.